Charles Bronson, who played the tough guy in many famous movies, left behind more than just movies. He left his family a lot of money, which made them very sad. But why did what he got make him cry instead of smile? Was it the amount of money he had, how he shared it, or the stories that were hidden in it? Stay with us to find out what Bronson really gave to the people he loved before he died. The Pennsylvania coal worker Charles Bronson ended up in movies as a bad guy, has died. He was a tough guy action star who became famous for his roles in the hit Death Wish Vengeance movies. He was 81 years old. Charles Bronson was more than just a Hollywood star, even though he was famous for his rough charm and intense screen personality. Bronson had a career that lasted more than 40 years. He captivated audiences with his captivating acts and became known for playing tough guys. He had a face that looked like it had been cut from a rock. Charles Bronson was one of the very best tough guys on the big screen. He always had one hand on the trigger of an automatic gun. When people paid respect to him after he died at age 81, they talked about how brooding and macho he was as an actor, how strangely self-deprecating his sense of humor was, and how violent and even offensive his movies were. His third wife, Kim, was by his side when he died at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. After having Alzheimer's disease for a long time, his health had gotten much worse in the last few weeks. Bronson was born into a working-class family in Pennsylvania and became an actor after the war as a way to escape his sad life. He was always going to play crooks, outcasts, and gunslingers. An Italian newspaper called him Il Brutto, which means the ugly one, because he didn't look good enough to be a main man. He seemed doomed to play small roles for a long time. The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and The Dirty Dozen were three movies that still caught people's attention, especially in Europe. In 1968, Alain Delon asked him to come to France to co-star in Adieu l'ami. That same year, Sergio Leone gave him the part that made or broke his career Once Upon a Time in the West. There were times when it seemed like hours would go by without Bronson saying a word. He was the strong, quiet type. In a joke about him, The Simpsons once imagined a town called Bronson, Missouri, where people stood indoors and said scary things like it ain't over. Michael Winner said he was a great actor, even though he didn't have a lot of different roles. Bronson once gave a more serious opinion. I hope to find a place where I can sip a drink while leaning my elbow against a fireplace one day. Bronson's path to fame wasn't as smooth as those of other Hollywood stars. He went back to Hollywood as a star when he was 50 years old. He talked about his ideas about why the trip had taken so long in an interview in 1971. Maybe I'm too manly casting directors cast based on their own ideas of what a man should be like. Some people might not think I look like their ideal. While he was young, he had no idea how famous he would become. There were 15 children born to a coal worker and his Lithuanian wife. He was the 11th child. His name was Charles Bunchinsky. Charles learned how to stay alive in the rough area of Scooptown, where you didn't have anything to lose because you had already lost it. They lived in a small shack with a lot of other people, and the kids wore clothes that their bigger siblings had worn before. Charles felt bad going to school in his sister's dress when he was 6 years old. Charles was 10 years old when his father died. Charles went into the mines with his brothers when he was 16 years old. He got paid $1 per ton of coal and took on dangerous jobs because the pay was better. Like other toughs in Scooptown, he caused trouble and went to jail for theft and attack. If it weren't for World War II, he might have worked in the mines all his life. When he was called up in 1943, he was in the U.S. Army Air Corps and served in the Pacific as a tail gunner on a B-29. Now that they've seen the world. He promised himself he would never go back to Scooptown. He said he wasn't interested in acting because he felt like making art. He was amazed at how much money movie stars could make. He joined the Philadelphia Play and Players Troupe and painted sets, and played a few small parts. Bronson worked on his pronunciation at the Pasadena Playhouse School and made money by selling toys and Christmas cards on street corners. After studio scouts saw him at the Playhouse, they hired him to play a gob in the 1951 Gary Cooper movie You're in the Navy Now. Bronson's first lead part was in Machine Gun Kelly, an 8-day exploitation movie that came out in 1958. His fame grew after he did great work in movies like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, The Battle of the Bulge, The Sandpiper, and The Dirty Dozen. But he never became a big star. His rough face and rude behavior didn't fit the Hollywood mold for leading guys. His film Death Wish, which came out in 1974, caused the most trouble. Bronson's life is shattered when young thieves kill his wife and rape his daughter. He is a wealthy liberal engineer. He promises to get rid of all the pests in the city, and the people who saw him executed cheered. Many people didn't like how vigilante the character was, but Death Wish was one of the biggest hits of the year. When Bernard Goetz shot teens he thought were threatening him in a New York subway, the debate grew even stronger. Bronson made 3 more Death Wish movies, and in 1987 he defended them. I believe they give people who have been harmed by crime and have been waiting for the police to protect them some comfort. People don't try to copy that kind of thing, though. Bronson could be just as quiet in person as he was on TV and in movies. He stayed away from the Hollywood scene. I have a lot of friends, but I don't have any. Bronson was a very unique and daring person, and his family life reflected that. It was full of moments that were just as strange and exciting as the man himself. When Charles Bronson met Harriet Tendler, he was just starting out in his work. They were both in the amateur theater group Plays and Players. When Bronson first joined the group, he was interested in painting scenes and making decorations. Harriet was Jewish and the daughter of a wealthy dairy farmer. Charlie Bukinski used to work as a coal worker and was a Catholic. He became interested in playing, though, and grew close to Tendler. Brooks had only 4 cents on him on their first date. 2 years later, they got married, even though Tendler's dad didn't want them to. After getting married in 1949, they went to California to achieve their bigger goals together. Tendler had things in 4.5 of the 5 bags they moved with, so Bronson barely had enough to pack. Bronson worked hard to improve his art in California. He was married to Tendler for 15 years before they split up in 1965. Before they split up, they had 2 kids, Suzanne and Tony. Bronson got married a second time when he was at the top of his game. He first had an affair with Jill Ireland, who was going to be his wife, who was married to David McCallum. In the end, Brown and Ireland got married in 1968. David McCallum, who stars on NCIS, had a hard time after his marriage to Ireland ended. In 2016, 50 years after the split, he finally talked about how it made him feel. He proved that he was in a much better place, and he didn't even hold a grudge against Bronson when his ex-wife left him for him. The famous actor Bronson met on A Great Escape and this. They met in Ireland. It was said that Bronson told McCallum on the set that he would leave him with his wife. However, this was just a guess for years. McCallum said that nothing like that happened when he was asked about it. When asked about Bronson, he said, "I never hated him. Charlie was always a good friend. When troubles come up, I don't think it's necessary to worry about them, get anxious, and be negative." Even though he didn't mind that his ex-wife was seeing Bronson. Even McCallum agreed that it was a tough time. He said that he and Ireland had 3 children together. They took in 3 kids as foster kids. Jason is the oldest. When their marriage ended, Ireland got to keep the kids, which made things harder for McCallum. McCallum, Bronson, and Jill Ireland were all actresses who wanted to make it big in the business. But there was always a chance of love and romance. When Bronson and Ireland got married, they made their family work together. He had 2 kids from his first marriage, and she had 3. While they were together, they had a daughter named Zulika, and also adopted a daughter. They adopted a girl named Katrina Holden. Her mother was the late casting director Hilary Holden, who died of a heart attack. Bronson looked like he had other kids and didn't have the money to adopt Katrina, but he did. Ireland was in 15 movies with Bronson and often played his main lady. To keep the family close, they would often take all of their kids to film sites and make their home wherever the movies were being shot. They also often went to a historical farmhouse in Vermont, where Ireland took care of horses and taught their daughter Zulika how to show horses. They also went to Snowmass, Colorado, for the winter break. Jill Ireland died at their home in Malibu in May 1990 after a long fight with breast cancer. That was sad. It was first found in 1986. But the sickness came back in a big way in 1989. Italia died at the age of 54. Bronson married Kim Weeks for the 3rd time in December 1998. Weeks was a former actress who worked at Dove Audio and helped make Jill Ireland's audiobooks. He was married to Weeks for 5 years before she died. Bronson's life was like a great movie. It had its ups and downs, love, heartbreak, and hard-won wins. He had to deal with a lot of problems along the way. There is still the question of what he left for his family. Charles Bronson was an American actor who worked for more than 40 years and was one of the best-paid actors of his time. Charles Bronson made most of his money by playing out roles. Many of the movies he was in were classics and got good reviews. Aside from that, he's made a lot of money by being in TV shows. At the height of his fame, he was known as the world's highest-paid worker. He made up to $1 million from movies like The Stone Killer. I like Death Wish and Chino. The tough guy's last $1 million paycheck was for the 1976 movie St. Ives. When Bronson made $2 million from the movie 10 to Midnight in 1983, his value went up even more. Besides his work in movies, Bronson was also in a number of TV shows. The Magnificent Seven, a Western show, and Miami Vice, a police drama, both had roles for him that came up again and again. Bronson was nominated for an Emmy Award in 1985 for his work on TV. Bronson made about $50 million from acting over the course of his career. In addition to being an actor, Bronson also owned a number of homes. There was a house for him in Malibu, California, and a ranch for him in Colorado. Bronson had a lot of cars and bikes as well. Around $20 million was thought to be in Bronson's personal funds at the time of his death. Fans often give celebrities strange and expensive gifts because they love them so much. However, one of the nicest gifts ever given by a fan was to Hollywood star Charles Bronson. In 1996, a woman from Louisville wrote in her will that she wanted to give all $300,000 to Bronson, who was her favorite star. The New York Post says Audrey Norwood died in 1997. She was 55 years old.